My name is Michelle Diaz, and I am the Education Program Manager at Trees Atlanta. And today we're going to be talking about soil. Our mission is to protect and improve the urban forest by planting, conservation, and education. We host education events year-round, and now during these times, we're doing them virtually. I'm glad that you've been able to join us, and please check out our website calendar to look at more classes that we are offering every week. Our speakers today are Jamie Rosenthal and Hadar, and we're very excited to partner with both of you, and I'll let both of them tell us more about their jobs and what they are doing. But if you have any questions for them, please share them on the chat or on the Q&A feature, and we'll be answering them for you at the end of the presentation. Also, after this event, you're going to be receiving an email with the recording for this class and a survey. Please provide us feedback on some other classes you'd like to have from us and some other content you'd like to also provide. Please tell us how you like this format as we are improving our education programs as we're sharing them online. And finally, I'll invite you and encourage you to follow us on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and sign up for our newsletters. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you, Jamie and Hadar.
Thank you, Michelle. So Hadar, are you going to present now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I will, I'll just introduce myself. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Jamie Rosenthal. I am the founder and CEO of Roots Down. We are basically an educational company that focuses on inspiring people to grow more food, grow ecology, get outside. We like to do continuing education, and we like to assist in connection and having you guys paving ways for you guys to connect to other people that are doing the same sort of things. So really excited to present this this workshop or this digital course today. I am super excited to have our guest with us, Hadar. She's going to be telling us a lot of in-depth stuff about soil. And we really want to say too, we really appreciate our continuing support and partnership with Trees Atlanta. You guys have been amazing partners with us doing this continuing education through this pandemic. I know it's not easy for anyone. Most of what I like to do is teach in person. So most of what we would end up doing for this course would be having our hands in the soil and doing some outside work. But here we are. So, but yeah, so if you don't know more about Roots Down or want to know more about Roots Down, please, Google us. We're on Instagram. We are on Twitter. We have a small Facebook presence, and we have an amazing website that's new. So please, Google us, find out more about what we do, and get to know the wacky world of Roots Down. So this course, We Are Soil, I think is one of the most foundational courses that we can teach. I think that this connection is some of the missing links that people have with if they want to have a really beautiful, healthy environment, a healthy garden, a healthy community with healthy, thriving people. I think it starts with the soil. Our soil is the most important, I believe, the most important resource we have on this planet. I think water and soil, and I think that both of those are super important. So excited to teach this course and tell you guys more about it. So without further ado, we'll go to our first slide. So we're going to get into some high level stuff here. So for those of you in the Southeast, I noticed most of you guys are here in the Atlanta area, are familiar with Georgia soil. And for those of you who are familiar with Georgia soil, a lot of like what I thought was Georgia soil was all clay, and it was hard to grow in, And there was a lot of like myths around Georgia soil that I thought was interesting. You know, I have a 10-year background with farming, and as you know, as a farmer, I learned to use clay to my benefit. I think it's got a lot of nutrients locked in it, and it's got a lot of really interesting properties that I think can be really useful. There is a lot of like micronutrients in clay soil. There is a lot of benefits, like I said, that hold water and can create really, really amazing soil with just a little bit of amendments. And, you know, things that like clay soil, like blueberries and things that are, you know, Georgia specific, peaches and blueberries, really like the clay soils. And I think that there's been this whole like, you know, demonization of clay soils, and you know that they're not as good as other soils. But I want to definitely squash that myth and help you guys understand what Georgia soil is. You know, the one thing that I would like to say like about soil that I think is really, really, or clay soil that's really funny. When I was a kid, I lived in Florida. We had really sandy soils, and I realized very quickly that when somebody brought home some soil in a bag, I didn't know what it was. I actually saw it for the first time, Georgia soil for the first time in a plastic baggie. And I thought it was drugs. I thought it was something crazy. It was a foreign substance. I'm like, what is this? Because all the soil that I was used to was sand, all just growing in sand. So so that was my first experience with Georgia soil, was in a plastic bag of all things. So I think that wanted to let you guys know how I first found that. So we can go to the next slide. So being a farmer, I found that plants, annuals to remediate soil and help open up the soils was how I was actually going to be able to farm successfully. These crops are absolutely a farmer's friend. Anything from alfalfa to clover to beans and legumes that fix nitrogen and allow for the soil to breathe. I learned very quickly that without cover crops, that poor soil or poorly aerated soil was going to be really hard to grow in. So I really got busy on my field. Some of the first things I did as a farmer was I lightly plowed. I ran a no-till farm, so we did very minimal impact, very minimal tillage. But I did light plowing, and I started inserting cover crops. You know, for the winter, we did a lot of clover and legumes and peas and rye, winter rye. And then for the summers, we used also clover, but buckwheat. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. A really, really great cover crop. So, you know, something to note about using cover crops is that they're seasonal, they're annual, they die back, and they produce a lot of biomass for the soil to feed on for many, many, many years to come. So I think it's really important to know how to use cover crops if you're looking to remediate soil. So again, as a farmer, you know, as an ecologically friendly farmer, I started really looking at what was the difference between using natives and non-natives to remediate my soil. You know, a lot of our diets are non-natives. A lot of what we eat as far as kales and bok choys and tomatoes and all those things are non-natives. They have a very shallow root depth. So I wanted you guys to see that in this slide, the difference between non-natives and natives. The natives typically have double to triple the amount of root depth that they can actually go down deeper and mine more minerals and more nutrients. And there's like also a technique that, you know, like when creating some native habitat is using a method called chopping and dropping, where you're actually chopping some of that stuff down because it's mined those minerals from the bottom and allowing it to decay on the top of the soil and become nutrients for stuff that's more shallow rooted. I find the most beautiful like biodiverse gardens in the world have a mixture of non-natives and natives, because we can't all eat a native diet. I stress that strongly. And I think as far as we're concerned as people, we want to make sure that we focus on things that are both native and non-native. But I wanted you guys to see the soil depth of these two things here, and using those natives and deeply taprooted things really make a difference. So I want to talk a little bit about the common lawn versus meadows. Common lawns that are everyday in your everyday life, things that you see all the time, have a typical root depth of about 2 inches, 2 to 4 inches. What happens there is there's still a lot of soil loss. They're problematic. You know, you're actually doing a lot of fertilizing. If you're looking to as a regenerative resource for remediating soil and creating soil, the common lawn is not the answer. I would like to see more meadow used where the common lawns are used, especially in areas that are not high traffic areas. Areas like railroad embankments, areas like city parks where there's like a big, huge, vast amount of green that's never touched or never walked on. We could be doing meadow installations and drawing down so much more carbon than we would on a regular typical lawn. And you know, Hadar will get a lot more into that when she presents. So I think that lawns are just not eco-friendly. I want to stress that they don't build soil, and I think that more people should look at their common everyday lawn and think, are we really using this? And can we install a meadow where this lawn is? And I think you'll end up benefiting from it. Again, the root depth on meadows are far, far further, and they do so much more for the soil than the common lawn would. And we are actually working with DeKalb County and Commissioner Ted Terry in District 6 to lay out a really great robust plan for creating more meadow installations in public right-of-ways and on public spaces. I would like to see a lot more flowers that incorporate meadow installations and more bee habitat and things like that. And if you guys ever have questions about what we're doing in DeKalb County, please let me know and I will let you, I'll answer any of your questions. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So trees to remediate soil. I think it's important to understand this at a basic level. I love this. I love tree science, and I want you guys to, like, when you go out in your landscape, I want you guys to kind of notice and observe some of these things. So some of my favorite trees are, you know, black locust and forest pansy, things, nitrogen fixing trees, right? Especially ones like the forest pansies and the black locust that are actually, you know, common to our area. They're not on the naughty list as far as planting. So I think that those plants can absolutely build soil. There's something called, you can use these in what's called coppicing or pollarding processes, where you actually chop the tree down at a certain length and it releases a lot of nitrogen in the soil. You can build soil really quickly with this, and with using tree species. And these are, most of the ones I'm talking about here are in the subcanopy layer. And I want to touch on the naughty list for a second, because I think most of you guys have been to a newly done construction area. I've noticed that mimosa trees are some of the first things that show up on the landscape. And there is a good reason for that. They're answering to a problem, compaction. The first things I notice with heavy compacted areas is some of these invasives coming up. They're opportunistic. They come up like the mimosas. You know, first succession trees, I know that they're on the naughty list. For me, I like to actually plant autumn olive and mimosa and let them grow to a certain height and then just chop them down back into the ground. Because they're so tenacious and because they provide such a dense root system and do so much for building the soil. So even if we're talking about invasives for a moment, I want to say that if it's in a heavy managed area and you're not going to let it seed and get out of control, I think there's really no problem in planting them to build soil really fast, and then chopping them back down into the soil and letting them decay for other larger species trees. And these are all like really great companions for larger maples and other larger specimen trees that you would grow, other forest specimen trees, pecans or anything like that you want to grow for canopy trees. These are actually really great partners to that. So you guys have all seen this in every single neighborhood in and around Atlanta or urban areas. This is erosion and soil degradation happening right in front of you. This is really what the common lawns and common green spaces that you're seeing, like, this is absolutely what happens. When you're seeing the brown in the water, that is your soil leaving the landscape. It is not a good thing to happen. I think that the urban environment is actually one of the places where we're losing soil the quickest. I believe that it is some simple solutions that can actually fix this. We could talk a lot more about passive strategies and water mitigation, things that people, homeowners and people that own sites can be doing, things that actually hold the water on your landscape for longer. I think it's on the next slide, Hadar, which is rain gardens and microsoils. I think if we created more of this stuff in our urban environment, we would hold onto the soil, keep it in place, and actually end up hydrating our landscapes so much more. I think that it kind of breaks my heart every time in my neighborhood I see all of the neighbors right above me. I see when it rains, the water is so brown and so murky. And I go to my yard, which I've put in a bunch of passive swales and have mitigated some of these issues, and I don't see any brown water coming off of my landscape. And it really was a very simple fix. So I think like educating people on ways to actually do this and implement this in their landscape can actually solve a lot of citywide water issues that we're having, with these chemicals getting into our waterways, because you can only be responsible for your own space. So I think it's important to understand that these simple features in your landscape can really save our water and build soil. This is like the lifeblood of building soil is capturing and storing water, which is a great segue to talk more about carbon sequestration. And I'll in a second I'll pass it on to Hadar and let her explain more about what that is. I will say though that working with government over the last few years, I've realized that there is so many programs and so much talk about carbon sequestration. I believe that it's the answer for us to actually have a planet that we can actually live on. I think the planet will do just fine without us. We need her to be able to survive. And I believe that there's going to be a lot of government subsidies and programs very, very, very quickly coming on with this new administration, that we're going to be able to incorporate more of these programs and do more carbon sequestration. Anything from planting a meadow in your front yard and not having your HOA complain about it, to building rain gardens and getting, hopefully government funding to be able to do that in your yard, or maybe like a discount on your bill. Things like that we're going to be looking into with DeKalb County in the future, because I think this is going to be the answer to solve a really big problem. We are losing too much carbon off of our soils. We do not believe in covering soils, and I think that's really, really tragic. So without further ado, I will pass the torch on to somebody who's going to go much further into the micro. I think this is going to be super exciting, and I want to welcome Hadar to the scene, and she's going to tell you probably more than you ever imagined tonight. So excited to welcome her on board. Take it away, Hadar.
Thank you, Jamie. Thanks for having me on this talk. Yeah, I have been working with soil for a few years now, mostly from the field of like agriculture perspective. But this year I took some time to kind of focus more on the basic foundational biology that I never quite understood or like knew in depth. And that is where I want to take the talk today, in that direction, into the micro world. One second. And I think it's important because if we want to work with soil and remediate soil, restore soil, we should know how it works, what it really is. And when I started learning about soil biology and all the life that lives in the soil, I was really super fascinated. And I felt like it was really important. And I was surprised that I didn't know these things before. I feel like it should have been in our textbooks or common knowledge, but anyway, I'm glad you are all here to learn about soil. It is the foundation or matrix of all life on Earth. And I think that it's largely been misunderstood over the past several decades, especially over the last century, since the Green Revolution, since farmers and soil scientists started getting trained by the chemical industry. So if we look at their definition of soil, it pretty much only acknowledges the mineral components of soil, the sand, silt, and clay, which they call this inert support matrix, which we need to add insoluble, inorganic soluble nutrients in order for our plants to grow. But ironically, this perspective perfectly describes dirt, which is what soil becomes when it's stripped and degraded of all life. But how can we go into the forest and see trees that grow hundreds of years in one of the most productive ecosystems on Earth, all growing from soil that never had fertilizers applied to it? Where do they get all their nutrients from? And that's where the soil microbe comes in. The soil microbe is pretty much all the living parts of the soil, this diverse and dynamic communities, from bacteria to fungi, nematodes and protozoa, to earthworms and insects, and they all work together. I just want to mention, when I say fungi, I'm talking about not the mushrooms that grow above ground that we see sometimes, but the underground part of the mushroom, which is called mycelium. It's like they grow, it's like the roots of a mushroom almost, but not all the mycelium produces mushrooms, but it's the underground part. And some of it is microscopic. Some of it we can see with our bare eyes when we look at soil. We can see these white hairs. And this is the fungi I'm referring to. So just like us humans, we have a gut microbiome, all these little critters living in our intestines and helping us to digest our food. So this is similar to the role of the soil microbiome. It's digesting food for the plants, and a lot of other functions that we'll get into a little bit. The soil food web is just a way that map out these organisms, that describes them in terms of their relationships of predator and prey. You can take a moment to look at this real quick. We have our fungi and bacteria, who are our primary consumers. They're decomposing organic matter in the soil. They're eating away at it and using it as their food source and absorbing these nutrients into their bodies. And then they get eaten by their predators, who get eaten by their predators, all through this food chain, this food web. And every step along the way, these predators have to release excess nutrients in the form of waste. And this waste is actually that organic matter converted into plant available form, so the plant can take these nutrients and use them as food. Whereas before, the plant couldn't access these nutrients from the organic matter directly. It had to go through the cycle in order to become available to the plant. But not only can these organisms decompose organic matter, but they can break down parent material like sand, silt, clay, rocks, and pebbles, which have lots of nutrients tied up in there in the crystalline structures of these minerals on their surfaces. Nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, calcium, boron, iron, all the nutrients that the plant really needs but can't access because they're held by positive and negative charges. So the plant can't get them immediately. But the fungi and bacteria can produce these enzymes that allow them to decompose this matter as well. So after it goes through this cycle, it's going to become available to the plant. And this is basically the soil microbe, soil microbe, all these organisms working together to create fertility, what we call fertility in the soil, eliminating our need for fertilizers. They do the work. as long as we make sure the conditions are there for them to thrive. And this is the process of nutrient cycling in the soil. And you can remember it by thinking the poop loop is how it works. And all these organisms are really important for the plant life, but the plant also plays a really important role. And this is how we know. We know the plant through photosynthesis uses sunlight and carbon dioxide to create sugars and carbohydrates for the plant. But just like humans, we can't subsist solely on sugars and carbohydrates, and neither can the plant. So it's going to release up to 40% of this energy into the soil through the roots in these forms of sugars, and we call these root exudates. And it's basically the plant's way of attracting and feeding these organisms, calling them to it, and they get the nutrients for the plant, and the plant gives it these sugars in exchange. Now their predators are going to be attracted to the roots, and all this process of nutrient cycling happens right at the roots, so the plant can immediately start absorbing the nutrients. If there is a wide diversity of these organisms, the plant can pick and choose. It can select what organisms it's going to attract depending on what compounds it's releasing from its roots. So it can get all the nutrients it needs on demand just by altering these compounds that it's releasing into the soil. So it really is an amazing thing what we're discovering, that plants and these soil microorganisms seem to have co-evolved in a mutually beneficial relationship, which just shows us how important they are. We also know that plants are super susceptible to a wide variety of pests and disease, especially those of us working in landscaping or growing a garden or growing food. We know this can be a huge problem, but these organisms can also act as your plant's immune system in addition to its digestive system. When your plant is attracting organisms, they are gluing and adhering themselves to the surface of the roots and creating a sort of castle wall. And that's protecting your roots from any pest or disease spores or eggs from germinating and reaching your plant to attack them. This also happens above ground as these organisms start to travel up on top of the plant, covering all the surfaces, the stems and the leaves. And when a pest comes to attack, it's going to test how strong the plant is, how strong its immunity is. And when it's well protected by these organisms, it's going to look elsewhere for food. And we're effectively, when we encourage the soil food web in our soil, we eliminate our need for pesticides. So I took this picture on a walk nearby. Another thing about these glues that these organisms produce, the fungi and bacteria, they're sticking things together in the soil. They're gluing particles together. And when you go to the forest and you pick up a handful of dirt, you can kind of see it looks like the soil's been rolled up into little balls. It's aggregated. We call these aggregates. And this is the soil organisms creating structure in your soil. When you have better aggregation, you have more space for air, roots, water in your soil, better infiltration and retention of water, and breaking up the compaction in our soil. So if we have compacted soil, oxygen's not getting in. Without these oxygens, these beneficial organisms can't thrive. And yeah. So we're avoiding problems like this, flooding in agricultural fields due to compaction, but also in the city, we have a lot of problems with runoff, like Jamie mentioned, because of compacted soils. When we build a house, we need to compact the ground to have a strong foundation for our house to build on. So all of our lands have been compacted. Everywhere that humans have kind of interacted with the land, it's been degraded. And when we restore these organisms, they're breaking up this compaction. And this here is a picture of a bioswale, like Jamie mentioned. We can use soil to absorb this runoff, filter it, and direct it back to the groundwater, filter it through the soil. On a larger scale, soil's gonna clean the water of our planet through the water cycle as it flows over terrestrial systems. While dirt does not. If we don't have these organisms, we have no structure. the nutrients can't be held in the soil, water can't be held, and then we're dealt with problems of leaching, erosion, and runoff. And one thing that soil has largely been overlooked for is its ability to sequester carbon. And we can reduce our emissions and keep the levels of the gases in our atmosphere the same, but we really need to sequester. We really need to pull the carbon back into the soil. We need to pull it out of our air to reverse this global warming issue that we have. But there is hope, because soil has a really large carbon pool. It means that we can hold a lot of soil. It has the soil has the potential to hold a lot of carbon in it, more than in the air, as we can hold in the ground. That's because most of the elevated levels of carbon in our atmosphere today came originally from the soil through our use and extraction of petroleum and through tilling. So we can hold this carbon in the soil, in the bodies of microorganisms, in their biomass. But fungi especially play an important role in this, because they are made mostly of carbon. They're hypha, they're strands that like grow underground. Their cell walls are made of carbon, and as they age, their cell walls get thicker and thicker of carbon. The fungi is storing carbon in its body. The largest organism on planet Earth is a fungus found in Oregon that spans thousands of acres, and it's made mostly of carbon. It's thousands of years old. So if we want to sequester carbon, we need to let our fungal populations grow and thrive. But we did a lot to destroy our soil and kill our organisms and mess up all these processes that it does for us. First and foremost, we did this by tilling. We started in ancient civilizations, early civilizations, pulling a plow with a bull about once a year, and now we till about 8 times a year with machinery, with heavy machinery, and this is heavily depleting our soil. It's slicing and dicing all these organisms in our soil. It's killing them, except for bacteria. Now only bacteria can grow, and as the bacteria starts to grow unchecked over all the surfaces we kind of opened up, they're going to be blowing off a huge amount of CO2, and the CO2 is going to be leaving the air. Tilling is one of the major causes of CO2 leaving the soil. Tilling is also causing compaction in our soil. When we think we're aerating, we're actually compacting the soil at the level to which we till, and all the problems that come with that compaction is just problems we're creating for ourselves. When we have killed everything in the soil, then inorganic chemical fertilizers are necessary in order for our plants to live, because nutrient cycling isn't happening anymore. But these nitrogen-based fertilizers that we use, they use a huge amount of fossil fuels to produce them. And only about 40% of these fertilizers are getting absorbed by the plant. The rest is either volatilized as gas, polluting our atmosphere, or running off into our oceans, creating these oxygen dead zones and algal blooms, and these areas are growing. But this is also a problem not just in agriculture, but in our backyards. When we fertilize our lawn or apply pesticides, as we kill the organisms in the soil, we're also not allowing these nutrients and substances to be retained in our soil, so they're going to get washed away upon first rain. Our insect and bird populations worldwide have been declining steadily over past several decades, and a UN report identifies pesticide use as a major cause of decline in these populations, as well as like our practice of spraying mosquito control, for example. It can kill pollinators miles away from insecticide drift. So there are a lot of biological methods we can use instead. One of them is just taking care of our soil microorganisms and letting them do their natural ability to protect our plants, our soil. So how can we encourage this life in our soil, in our own backyard? What practices can we do to ensure the safety of these organisms, to let them grow and multiply? So one is using compost, my favorite thing. Making compost is basically just breeding organisms. You're breeding them into huge numbers and then applying them to your soil, and they'll start getting to work on your soil and creating structure and creating symbiotic relationships with your plants. So compost is super important. Here I'm doing just a thermophilic method of composting is what I do at home, but there's lots of ways you can make compost. And with this compost, you can extract the organisms into water and create a tea and spray your garden with it and just give it all that good stuff. Yeah, leave the leaves on the ground. It's a natural process. It's like a interaction between trees and the soil. It's leaves and dead material is fungal food. It's mostly carbon. So if we just leave them and let our fungi populations decompose them over time, they're going to absorb that carbon into their bodies. Yeah, so if you don't want to leave them on your lawn or something like that, at least you can use them to mulch your garden beds or rake them around your tree or put them in your compost as fungal foods. Anywhere that you have any bare surfaces on your land where you don't have something growing, where it's uncovered, carbon dioxide's leaving that soil, it's susceptible to compaction. If with just rain falling on bare soil is compacting your soil. So cover all your surfaces either with a mulch or with a live cover crop, plants. Better with a live cover crop, because then you're having a constant food source for your organisms. Your plant is going to be constantly feeding those soil microbes. Plant a diverse plant species. With what you plant in your garden, make it diverse, lots of different species, lots of different kinds of plants, because different kinds of plants interact, they have associations with different kinds of organisms. So when you have a diversity above ground, you have a diversity below ground, and diversity is key. Like we talked about in the beginning, the plant can cultivate these organisms at its own will. So you want to provide it some choice. Stop tilling and spraying for the reasons we mentioned. And I just want to look at this, show you this case study. It's a case study that my teacher, who I'm studying under, Dr. Elaine Ingham, who is a soil microbiologist, she and her team of researchers wanted to use this soil food web approach to see effects of restoring the soil food web in the soil. And although I'm not a fan of lawns, because of the lack of diversity there and everything that we mentioned, it is still amazing to see that a lawn can be grown without using fertilizers, without using pesticides. The left side of this picture, all they did was apply compost and soil drench of like an extract, compost extract, and I think a couple times, and these are the results. This is an aerial view of, I think, of a different house that they did, but they worked with an eco-lawn company doing the same thing. They really assessed the soil under a microscope. They looked at what was missing and they restored it using compost. Really, that's all they really do. And this picture was taken during a drought period. People weren't really allowed to water their lawns, and these people's lawns stayed green throughout this whole period because their roots could reach deeper, access more moisture, and didn't need as much irrigation. And they also had less weed pressure than the neighbors as well, which is another conversation. I think it's getting a little bit too scientific at that point, but really it can also reduce weed pressure when you have these organisms. Healthy soil, healthy us, healthy humans. There's a huge correlation between soil health and human health. If a plant is getting all of its nutrients, except for two, carbon dioxide and energy from the sun, all the other nutrients are coming from the soil, then human health comes from the soil. When a plant gets all the nutrients balanced, in a proper balance, it's healthier, it tastes better, and it satisfies our hunger. And now there's a lot of excitement around the human gut microbiome and all its newfound benefits to our health, like digesting our food and creating essential vitamins, protecting our organs, protecting us against disease. So soil is a major inoculant and provider of these organisms that we rely on for our health. So if we don't have healthy soil, we're going to be lacking our nutrients as well. And these organisms are nature's operating system in a way. And these are some pictures from my microscope. It's we got fungi, these little strands, and this amoeba nestled inside this one, and all these little specks all around are bacterias. We got some protozoa. They swim around. They're a predator of bacteria. Nematodes and microarthropods. They're really cute. So if you just take a look, there's so much you can find down there. Right now I'm studying like microscopy, soil microscopy, so I can really see what biology is present, so we know what biology is missing, and it's so much fun. And now we know a lot more than we did before, and the soil microbiome is finally coming to the forefront of science. And whether we're working on our lawns, our yards, our gardens, community garden, or if we're growing food on a farm, if we're managing a park, let us keep these soil organisms in mind and reap all of their benefits, and yeah, get to know them a little bit better. I think that's it.
Well, thank you. That was amazing. That was really, really great. For those of you who don't know Dr. Lang Ingham's work, definitely get some information about that, and definitely read about soil microbiology and the soil food web. I think it is really, really interesting science that actually relates a lot to our everyday life. And I think what you'll find in the soil is equal to what you'll find in the cosmos. It's like it's just so vast, and there's so much going on. So Hadar, that was awesome. Thank you so much. That was just
yeah, a lot of information. I hope it wasn't too much, but I just think it's so fascinating. I as far as I'm aware, they don't teach this in agriculture school.
No, I think that a lot of the audience should know that I've been heavily involved in all the USDA like extension services and stuff, and it's kind of sad what they don't what they miss in agriculture is really like the building blocks of how we can actually change our food systems. And I think it's education is so important that we need in order to make more regenerative systems. And working with the Extension Service, I've noticed that they are definitely lacking in this, in soil science and soil health, micronutrients, macronutrients. There's not a lot of testing for that sort of stuff. You really got to dig for it. So it's just really, there's some, I don't know, Michelle, do you want to focus like on the Q&A? There's some questions that have come up.
Yeah, I see some questions on the chat and on the Q&A. So let's take the Q&A first. The first question is, what are the elite benefits of tilling? What are we thinking? What were people thinking that it even did people begin with this practice?
I mean, the layman answer, like as a farmer, was quick access to those nutrients, right? Hadar, and probably like less compaction, like easy weed suppression, and just it was the easy way. It was for any farmer. It's just the easy way to do things. That's why it was done that way.
Yeah, I think also when we started cultivation, the practice of cultivation, we probably had to clear areas out. We're taking those plants out, and now the soil, it's already getting degraded. It's getting rained on, stepped on, nutrient blow off at that point. And so I think maybe people just felt like we need to create more the structure, put the structure back into the soil. We didn't know how things worked yet in a natural way.
Yeah, the best ways back then were the quickest ways to do things, and yeah, it came from like, you know, fast and easy. The message of feeding the world, we have to feed billions of people, so let's do it quick, fast, and easy. It hasn't gotten us in a good place. So.
And another question here on the Q&A, it's, where's the best place to get my soil tested in Atlanta? Do you know where?
I'm not aware of that. I'm actually fairly new here, but I know that most of the soil testing done that's really widely available is chemical soil testing. So they'll tell you really the levels of each nutrient in your soil. And these tests can come back like with poor like levels of nutrients, even when you have enough nutrients. But if you don't have the biology making it available, like if you can have the biology there cycling your nutrients, but only a little bit of these nutrients are going to be detectable on the test, even though they're just constantly in this circulation between the plant and the organism. So we should actually be looking more at the biology and then the chemistry, in my opinion, get biological analysis of soil. I'm getting trained to do this myself, actually. But yeah, I think it's more, it tells you more than chemical tests. And I don't know where you can get that done.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank. I know a place, and I will definitely, I can email you and email the panelists. I couldn't get it right off the bat. I know there is a professor at Kennesaw State University, Michael Blackwell, who teaches soil studies, and he's in the farming lab there. He will really know. I see Dawn Brown is asking that. You know, I don't believe the UGA, if you can tell me otherwise, I don't believe the UGA extension offers a vast soil testing facility. And while they may test for NPK, like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, I don't believe that they have the capabilities, or correct me if I'm wrong, Dawn, but they don't have capabilities of testing for macro and micronutrients, and also testing for existing inert chemicals and certain things that you should know about your soil before you farm in it. But so I think UGA extension, if you're like looking for like the basic idea of where your soil is starting, but it is not telling a whole picture. So yeah, it's good to research, and I will definitely, to all the people that are on this call, I'll make sure that I pass that information along to Michelle. And we can get that to you guys. And Hadar and I will do a little digging for you.
And somebody suggested the DeKalb County Extension Services.
Same. It's all like an affiliate of UGA Extension. Again, not to poo-poo on them, but I will say it's a bit that, you know, it's like the FFA, like Future Farmers of America, really heavy tillage. They have a large crop school that teaches heavy fertilizing and heavy tilling and heavy machinery and all that sort of stuff. I think what Hadar and I are talking about today is kind of the antithesis of all of that. So,
yeah, they probably don't do biological analysis of your soil. They can't tell you what organisms you have in your soil. You can go to the website of the soilfoodweb.org, I think, which is Dr. Elaine Ingham's website. They actually have a network of people that they're training to be able to do biological analysis. It's really not widely offered, but they might be a good resource if you want to get biological testing for your soil. You might have to send a sample a bit ways, but yeah.
I'm looking up now. It's soilfoodweb.com.
And Heather, I see a few questions about the compost tea here. One question is, can you share more about the compost tea and the beneficial sprays that could increase the soil health? And what do you make? And another person is, can you share any recipes for the mulch tea or extract you mentioned? Or can you suggest a place to get such a recipe?
So an extract is just making an extract of composts, like solid compost in water, and you're extracting those organisms and drenching your soil with that. So you need a source of compost, and you can do it in a bucket with a little air pump inside, and the bubbles are gonna like dislodge the organisms from the compost. You bubble it for 24 hours to 36 hours. And you can just drench your soil, and you're inoculating your soil with organisms that way. A tea is actually a little bit different. You're doing the same process, but you're also giving that brew food for your organisms. So as they're getting extracted from the compost, they're also growing and multiplying. And I mentioned in my talk that these organisms produce glues, and they're going to start producing these glues in the brew. And so when you're making a tea, you're putting the compost in the water with a pump of bubbles, and you're also adding foods. Like, you can find recipes online. Kelp meal is a good fungi food. Molasses is a good bacterial food. You can use humic acids, just biological organic amendments you can get at a land, like a Home Depot. I think they have some biological amendments as well. And then they're creating these glues, and you use the tea to spray the above ground parts of your plants, the leaves and the stalks and the trunks of trees and everything. And that creates the coating of organisms on the outside. And the glues are gonna like stick that material directly on your leaves when you're spraying.
There's so many benefits. I think my farm thrived off of compost tea. And you got to remember that when you're making compost, you only have so much. Just spread it out. You only have so much biology there, right? So by making compost tea, you're actually expanding on that biology that's existing. All the microbiology is like there's a huge X factor of how many more microbes you'll end up having to spray if you just feed it a little bit. So like aerated compost tea, we used to make it in 55-gallon drums. We learned through Dr. Elaine Ingham's class that she did on the PDC that I took, and we learned how to make aerated compost tea, and it was all over from there for me. Like, we used it. Some people that don't know, like, there's plenty of recipes out there, so we won't give you a specific recipe. I used kelp, and mostly used kelp, sometimes fish emulsion, and molasses, like a really dark blackstrap molasses. But what people don't know about compost tea is it really helps on fighting down fungal issues that you'll have on your late season crops, like tomatoes, like for any like molds or rust or anything that you're going to have. Like, it really ends up introducing all that really good bacteria to fight off the bad, and all the bad funguses and stuff that'll show up. So I think that's amazing resource for spreading bacteria, good bacteria, all over your farm, or your garden, and you don't have to do it with much compost either.
And I noticed somebody's suggesting also to look into Rodale for soil test.
Yes, that is it.
And they have a new site on the southeast of Atlanta. Thank you for suggesting that.
Yeah, I believe so. And they're hiring right now too, by the way.
Mhm.
So if anyone's interested, I think I made a post on that recently, but the Rodale Institute is hiring. Thank you so much, by the way. Yes, Rodale Institute, that's what I was thinking earlier.
I see somebody's asking if you could recommend a landscaping company that could help this person establish a meadow in a residential setting.
Yeah, I think I can definitely mention a few. We are actually building. We have a really great Grow Don't Mow network that Hadar is a part of, and we meet every week. We're doing a 10-week course with all these burgeoning new landscaping companies. So someone's saying Community Foodscapes, Mike McCord, yes. I don't know if he's extensive on meadow installation. I would ask him if he does that. I'm not sure if he does meadow installation or not. We'll have to ask him about that. I'm not sure if he knows. I know a really good company too, Radish and Rose. I know that he has a lot of meadow experience as well. And I'm sure we could pass a few of these on, some more information on to you guys about different companies that could do it. And yeah, I mean, whether you're looking for like an annual meadow, that's also, some people think like when they think of meadow, they think, oh, I'm going to plant a cosmos or zinnias, and that's more of like a wild, like a flower garden, not really a meadow. A meadow to me, like the definition of that would be a good amount, a healthy amount of diversity, ribes and forbs, and things that like are flowering, and different species, and they're perennial in nature mostly. Most of your meadow should be about 80 to 75% perennial in nature. So we could pass that more information along to anyone who's interested in meadow stuff. We'll make sure we follow back up with them on that.
Yes. Another person is asking also for a landscaping company, but in this case, somebody who can install a rain garden. Or is it easier to do it yourself, and how expensive is it?
Rain gardens are not an easy thing to tackle yourself. Here's some of the bad things about clay is it's the most heaviest substrate you'll ever move, like if you're digging in clay surfaces. So digging a rain garden out by yourself might be too much of a job for you. I think that certain companies would be better fitted to actually dig that out for you and make sure that the foundational work of this, so that it'll actually operate correctly. And then if you wanted to, you can actually during your own time put in some aggregate and put in some plants and that sort of thing. Someone else mentioned again, Community Foodscapes. I'm seeing them. Again, I would say, just ask Mike McCord if he does rain gardens, if that's something. I definitely would make sure that whoever does. I'm a big believer in hiring. Make sure you ask the people that you would hire if they've ever done hydrology work, because you can really cause more of a problem with a rain garden or a swale. So you want someone that has had 5 to 10 years experience understanding hydrology. It's so important to do, and to do it right. If you're doing a small little project, not a big deal, but make sure, again, I don't know about Mike McCord and what he is able to do or what Community Foodscapes can do, but definitely look into them, and we could definitely copy and paste some other people. Somebody, Don, you're really plug in Community Foodscapes. I'm sure they appreciate that. So yeah, we'll definitely pass along some people. Again, I think like Radish and Rose, Shades of Green, Permaculture. I know that they are actually really skilled at that sort of thing as well. So.
And some more questions about the compost here. Where Are there any sources for buying compost? And what is the specific, is there a specific time of year that's better to add in compost to your garden? Or can you do it at any time? So where can you find it at what time of the year?
You can add it at any time of the year. But yeah, better to add it when you're planting, because then you're getting the roots producing these exudates and feeding the organisms. If it just sits there, might run out of food. But I usually make compost throughout the winter, and when spring comes, I put it everywhere when I'm sowing my seeds. And teas as well, I apply once a month, every month, the first 3 months of the growing season. That's my go-to recipe. As far as places to get it, I'm not sure here in Atlanta.
There are many places to get compost. The question is, are there many places to get really good compost?
Yeah.
You know, Compost Now, I think, is doing it right. I think it's not extremely affordable for just everybody. I'm being honest. I love their company and believe in everything that they're doing, and we want to make it affordable. But I think that it's really, really important to understand that, you know, I get a lot of municipal compost and stuff, and it's just the garbage you find in it, and it's not completely broken down. It's anaerobic typically, like 9 times out of 10 I get it, it's still like they've stopped the process of it cooking, so it smells really bad. That's the, you know, anaerobic bacteria. I would say, you know, Compost Now, like, I mean, the best compost you'll ever get is just doing it right and doing it at your house, closest to home. But
yeah, I was gonna say, ever since I started making my own, I probably won't purchase, because when you make your own, you know that you've made it under the right conditions. You kept it aerobic, airflow, you put the right materials inside. And commercial composting operations, yeah, sometimes it smells bad, and you know you have bad organisms growing in there, and you don't know what it is really.
Yeah, very true. So I'd say one of my goals, I mean, you guys are asking really good questions, and one of my goals is actually, like, it's kind of funny, like, we can't name even a few landscaping companies that do like passive irrigation plans, rain gardens, meadows, making compost and delivering it. With the almost $5 billion landscaping industry in Atlanta, surely we could start building that. And that's really what I'm hoping to do with our Grow Don't Mow network, is build, you know, some really great companies that can actually answer to these questions. I really want to see a lot more community composting. I think we should, if we have access to free food in our communities with community gardens, I think we should have access to compost. And I think that I'd love to see, like, the cities and communities start to hire, like, compost rangers, you know, that go and collect your food scraps, food waste. It really works really well in big bulks. It doesn't work well in really small batches. Like, it works not in too larger batches, but right in the medium level, you know, like where it can be operated with one piece of machinery and flipping it. Compost works really well with in that sort of thing. So I really want to see a lot more community composting happening.
I think Georgia Food Well Alliance.
So the Food Well Alliance, yeah.
Yeah, I think I just saw that they're offering a couple grants to community gardens to set up composting systems. So if anyone in the crowd is part of managing a community garden in their area, in their neighborhood, you should check out their grants they're offering. I think you have to apply by in 2 weeks. So you could get sponsored starting a nice composting project in your neighborhood.
And I see a few questions about meadows and plants also. So one of the question is, are there any meadow seeds mixes designed for this area? And then somebody's also asking for a recommendation for a quickly growing low light cover crop. Where the soil is very compacted and clay-like.
So meadow seeds. I think you can go and purchase like bulk meadow seeds that, we don't have many savannas here in Georgia, and that's something to know, that there, when we say like native to our area, it would be like things you would see in like a natural meadow area. I use like Prairie Moon, and you can talk to a seed consultant there, and they can put together as closely, tell them the soil type, and they can put together a mix for you. Prairie Moon Meadow Seed Company. Again, I'll have to remember these questions, Michelle, and I can better answer them with a document and post it to our website, and we can have it up here in the next.
Sure, I'll make some notes and we can send them.
Yeah, I do have a few other companies, but right off the top of my head, I can't remember. I mean, American Meadows, it's a really like cheeky company for like cheap meadow seeds, so you can get a lot of bulk, like Cosmos and Zinnias and stuff that you want for like instant pop of color. I think it's important too. I want to make mention, and I didn't make mention this before, there is definitely a good thing to understand that ecology doesn't happen overnight. If you go from a grassy Bermuda lawn to a meadow and you think you're going to do it overnight, which is one till and then planting, it is going to frustrate you. You're going to pull your hair out. Please, for the love of God, understand that there's got to be an interim, like something that's highly allelopathic. I might be saying that wrong, allelopathic or allelopathic. I've been checked both ways I've said it, so I just say it both ways to cover my ass. But it's those properties of plants that actually ward off other plants and tell the other plants to go grow somewhere else. And I'm sure Hadar could probably get into more of the science behind that, but my main point is, what I like to do if I'm doing a meadow is you do have to eradicate the grasses and kill the grasses first, whether that's through like maybe if you're tilling once and you're never tilling again, that's the only way I'll ever promote tilling, to get rid of some of the noxious grasses, because we got in the position of having all of these horrible noxious weeds and grasses to begin with. Interplanting meadow doesn't work. So I would think if you're going to go from lawn to meadow, you should be thinking about an interim, like a cover crop would be really, really great. Like that's where we use, like in the summer, buckwheat. We planted the crap out of buckwheat, right? You plant it as thick as you can, and then you let it kind of fall down naturally, and then you go in and you kind of, it'll die back. It's like a 30-day cycle, flowering cycle, and then you can plant some of your perennial stuff into your meadow. So it's a process. It's not an overnight, quickly done thing. Hadar, do you have anything to add to that?
When it comes to, so ecosystem succession, there are ecosystems that we find around the world happen in succession. Like an ecosystem will naturally go through different stages, from an arid ecosystem where not much grows, to weeds, that's like early successional ecosystem, to short grasses, mid-range grasses, tall grasses, up to forest. And this is kind of the evolution of an ecosystem in a really long term. But what we found is that these ecosystems, as we advance in succession, our biology also corresponds, the ratio between fungi and bacteria. So basically, if we want to grow a tall grass meadow, it's a later successional ecosystem than a weedy field is. So we need to improve the biology for that, what we're planting, to survive. It needs more fungal biomass in the soil. So before you plant a meadow, remediate your soil, add compost, add fungal inoculants, then plant your tall grass meadows or whatever you want to do, because if you do without with the soil you have now, most backyards are bacterially dominant. You'll just look under the microscope and just see bacteria and not much else. So without restoring all those other organisms, it's not really going to work.
So is it safe to say that most things in meadows and grassy areas are bacteria dominant, and most things in the forest are fungally dominant soils, right?
Yeah, tall grasses and meadows are about 1-to-1.
Oh, really? Okay.
But what we have, like in my backyard here, it's been sprayed a lot over its history, and it's just been Bermuda lawn, which is pretty much the only thing that's going to grow in a bacterially dominated soil.
Yeah.
If I want to grow something else, I need to remediate the soil first.
Michelle, to make mention, Roundstone Seed Company, that was the company I was thinking of, that they have meadow experts you can call and like get seed mixes. It's not cheap, and you can tell them what you want to do. And then I do remember that the last question was, is there an option for, was it an option for a shady, quick growing? Was that what someone was asking? Mm-hmm. Shady, quick growing.
For quickly growing, low light cover crops.
Cover crops. So I would say this, and it really is site specific. The question I would ask, if it's high traffic, is it a high traffic area that you want to walk in? And if the answer is yes, I'll give you both answers. If the answer is yes, what I would choose is something called an eco fescue, which is a very thin bladed, it's not your typical fescue. Again, I'm going against what I said before. Like if it's a high traffic area, you're not going to change it overnight. If your kids are playing on it, you should have a better lawn. You shouldn't have no lawn because you need somewhere to play. So it's an eco fescue pearls mix, pearl as in the jewel, or stone or whatever it is, aggregate. It is Pearls Mix is the name of the company. And they actually have designed a fescue, shade tolerant fescue that grows really, 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 really thin, very slow, and has very good, long, deep tap roots. I would suggest that. If it's a non-high traffic area, don't put mulch down. Get free wood chips and put it down. Put some ferns, some hostas. And find other shade-loving plants that I'm probably not mentioning. But I tend to think that if it's a shady area, it's gonna be really hard to grow anything that's really got a lot of ground cover. If you've ever noticed, you walk through the forest, you don't see much grass, right? So I think that's a good indicator of maybe you shouldn't force it. So I would say if it's really shady and high traffic, I would go with Pearls Mix. If it's not, I would probably think about putting it in a different plan.
And another question here is, if the raised beds without added dirt and soil are going to cause some compaction in the soil. So raised beds are preferred for vegetable gardens, but what is the best thing for the vegetables to thrive?
Nothing wrong with raised beds, especially if there is a connection between the soil you're putting in your raised bed and the soil that's underneath. If you're getting good biology and using compost and teas, that biology is going to start eating away at the soil you have underneath the bed, and slowly work on that and structure that, and eventually maybe you can grow directly in the ground. But it is easy to build a bed, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I think we've answered all questions from the Q&A and the chat. I noticed somebody raised their hand here, so if you'd like to share your question with us. Yeah, but thank you so much. This information is great. I mean, for Trees Atlanta as well, we need to learn more about the soil composition as well. How can we improve it as we're planting tons of trees and creating meadows and planting native plants around. So this is great information for us as well.
I want to recommend, before we go, this movie. I just watched it. It's called Kiss the Ground, and I watched it on Netflix. It's so amazing. It really talks more about the potential of soil, a lot of things we touched on, but in a really beautiful way, and tying that into its global impact, like climate change and health, human health. It's really an inspiring movie. Yeah. Check it out.
Yeah, I super enjoyed it. I think the more we can do, and I would love to hear any of y'all's ideas, the more we can do to actually build this into our everyday knowledge base, you know, how it connects, how all these make connections to like our food waste, to our planet, to our survival, to everything, and the ways we can wrap this up and bundle it up and teach the youth how to know and understand these processes, and not make it so high level that it's not understood. We need to get a lot more youth involved in these sorts of programs. And that is one of our missions with Roots Down, is we've created a really fun and youthful brand so that kids can actually, we've created what's called the Green Hive movement. And the Green Hive movement is going to be a group of kids that we're going to be working with starting, you know, in the DeKalb County schools. And we're going to be working with them to teach them this stuff, but make it fun and make it something that they're really, really excited about doing. And I think Kiss the Ground did an amazing job. It was super inspirational. My daughter absolutely loved it. And I thought it was a great movie. And really like maybe miss farming for a little bit, just a little bit. But yeah, it was a great movie. And for those of you who don't know, Roots Down is hiring. Want to throw that out there just in case you guys are wondering. We are, if you go to our website, www.rootsdownga.com, you know, you go under jobs. We are hiring both a program manager and a social media intern for 2021. So we would love to talk with anyone that wants to help us go on this journey. I think it would be awesome. So yeah, that was all I got to say.
Thank you so much. And if anybody has any other questions, I noticed 2 people raise their hands here. Any other questions?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Linda, is it Linda?
Yes. Yeah. I didn't know if you could hear me or not. So tilling is not good. So what should farmers who have large plots of land be doing?
I would say just start with compost. You can mix your seeds into a compost and disperse that together so your seeds are well protected, and they'll just grow. With a couple applications of teas and extracts, you should already see results. As far as I know from the case studies I've been looking at, I haven't applied the soil food web from beginning to end on a project, but from case studies I've been seeing, within one growing season, you cut down your costs on fertilizers, and you're getting better yields, and you're improving your soil. My main thing, I think the most power is just in microbial inoculants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's so much, Linda, out there that I studied, you know, in my later days. When I started farming, it was all till.
Mm-hmm.
That was all. That's how I learned. But when I started to going to minimal tillage and then to no-till, I started noticing a huge difference in my pest pressure. There's so much no-till science out there right now for no-till gardens. I think like appropriate technology is okay when it's used like very sparingly. Like for instance, if you have a large space and you are starting from scratch, I get where the farmer has got to go in and like plow that land under. There is a means to, if there's a plan and you're doing it with intention, and you never want to hurt your soil like that again, I think it can be done very respectfully. But there's a lot of no-till science out there that I think that small farmers really could benefit from, which we're hoping to, again, in DeKalb, we're hoping to roll out this education to all the urban agriculturists out there to teach them about no-till. And I'll be doing a lot more workshops and things. We'll probably partner with a farmer in DeKalb County and do some really great no-till workshops. There's really great integration of like using cover crops and proper timing and really great mulch and wood chips and straw and all that. You can really grow a lot of food without doing any tilling.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Elaine, I remember her saying, if you've been using the conventional method for a long time and you want to switch, she says, till this one last time, but as you do, till in compost, till in organisms, and then don't again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Linda. Good question. Eric Williams, are you on the call? You raised your hand. Are you wanting to ask a question?
Oh, I think he doesn't have a question anymore.
Yes, I did. You answered it actually. Thank you.
Oh yeah. Well, great. Good to know. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for everybody for joining us for so many good questions. And thank you, Jamie and Hadar. I hope everybody have a great night and hope to see you around again soon.
Well, happy 2021. Everyone stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hadar. You were amazing.
Thanks so much.
Good night.
Good night.